Magnus Carlsen again and again and again. This has been the story of the Champions Chess Tour insofar. We have concluded round 4 and the reigning world champion is absolutely dominating the field. Obviously it was great excitement that we all felt before round 4 when Magnus Carlsen was paired against the Indian prodigy Praggnanandhaa, who until that point was untouchable virtually. So obviously the excitement was there to see how the youngster would fare against the world champion, and unfortunately for the youngster, there is a reason why Magnus Carlsen is the reigning world champion. Boy, we have seen yet another masterclass. I have picked game 3 from their encounter for today's recap video, and just like the last one, this one I believe carries again such a great value of educational content. And again, I believe that if we look at it with the right eye, we can actually bridge even 1,000 rating point gap there and take away a lot of valuable learning from what Magnus Carlsen does over the chessboard in a mere 8 minutes, which is what he spent on this particular game. So let's have a look. The opening was the Tarrasch defense, which, by the way, this is game 3, was also featured in their second game when they played with reverse colors. Maggie likes to throw in the odd Tarrasch here and there, and Pragg decided that that was his choice of weapon with the black pieces too. And we are here seeing a main variation with c takes d5. a3 is also a commonly known main line with the idea of taking on c5 and then grabbing a tempo with b4 on the queen side. So take, bishop b5, takes, knight takes. And it's very important that at this point we stop here for a second, because I would like to point out something to you that may not be very obvious to most of you, but I think this is what this whole game is a perfect example of. Yes, we are in opening theory, but more importantly, we are here in a particular structure. Said structure is known as the IQP, the isolated queen pawn. And as such, even if you don't know any theory, but you understand the structure, you should be able to play a very good game, in fact, for either color. And why strategy in this position, in this IQP, is crystal clear. We want to trade pieces. We would like to stir the game towards an endgame scenario where we can exploit the weak isolated pawn. Additionally to that, we always want to make sure that we firmly blockade the isolated pawn with a piece, preferably a knight, right in front of it. Now, in light of what I just said, let's have a look at how Magnus plays out this opening / the early middle game. Bishop d7, castles, bishop d6, knight f3, he drops back. This move is often a necessary measure to keep the king side secure. And very often you will see anyway that this knight gets rerouted to d4 anyway. Bishop e6, b3. The bishop gets developed to the long diagonal, where it also covers the vitally important d4 square. Bishop b2, bishop g4. He drops back to break the pin with bishop e2. And that's again an important thing to note, that this bishop is actually completely useless on this diagonal. So the best we can do is to come back. It's a preventative measure against ideas like knight e5 anyway. And after rook c8, now that he has done development, he begins the strategy that I just described before. And boy, this is a masterclass by the world champ again. Watch. Knight h4, that's trade. Remember the idea that I told you about trading pieces when playing against the IQP? Here we go. Trade. Note that after bishop takes, knight takes. Not queen, because then d4 becomes possible. The knight can come to f5. This knight can come to d4. The blockade is complete. And even white has got some annoying threats due to the excellently placed knight on f5. So, Pragg drops back to g6. Magnus goes, thank you, I wanted to trade. Trade. Knight b5, threatening to take the bishop, but also wanting to relocate in front of the d5 pawn on the d4 square, as per the strategy against the IQP. Bishop back, bishop f3, controlling center, denying knight e4 to some degree, and hitting d5. a6, knight d4. Rook e8, trades. And here, I must mention though, that this trade leads to a different pawn structure, but actually I like to when I teach this pawn structure, I actually like to teach these two almost hand in hand, because isolated queen pawn structures very often transition into hanging pawns, which actually carry from the defender's side a very similar strategy, which is straight down to endgames and try to exploit the weaker pawns. So Magnus' strategy doesn't change here. We still want to simplify, and exploit the weak pawn, which now has become the c6 pawn by virtue of putting itself onto a semi-open file and being backward. After c5, we are in a classic case of hanging pawns, where both bishops are beautifully operating on the diagonals. So we have played 20 moves, and Magnus has done nothing but what you would read in a textbook written for a 1600 about how to play an IQP. And that is why chess is so beautiful, because even when it's done by the best, they very often, in fact far more often than not, operate alongside the same principles that are just about better than beginner player should do if they follow the words of the books, courses, whatever they are learning from. And that's quite inspiring to see that these theories never get old, and that these concepts are the main driving force behind the play of the reigning world champion, near 2900 rating points. Awesome stuff there. Queen d3. Now the idea is to bring the rooks into the party. a5. Black often tries to break these two pawns with an a4 pawn sack, which would also make this one, by the way, a passed pawn. Rook c1, piling up on c6, knight e4. Oh, that's a trade. That's right. Let's do that. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Another trade. And as you can see now, we have traded down 3 pairs of minor pieces. And as a result of that, the usual kingside counterplay / attack that the side with the IQP or with the hanging pawns tries to do is very unlikely to succeed. Actually, Pragg does set up here a mate threat or something to that effect on h2, but precisely because of the lack of pieces on the board, white can now even get away with walking the king to the middle because there are no pieces to attack it there. By the way, I would like to quickly go back here just for 1 second. That was the first mistake, major mistake by Pragg, that here he played rook h4 first instead of throwing queen d6 right away in, forcing g3. And then obviously now the rook is not going to go to h4, but instead he can do something like g5 and try to play on the king side by other measures. Rook h4 was the mistake that actually decided the game essentially, because now after rook fc1, queen d6, instead of playing g3, Magnus just casually moved the king to f1, moving it out of trouble. And now he's ready to penetrate on a6 and pick off the pawn on c6. Now because of Pragg's rook lift, the black back rank is also very vulnerable, so there will be issues at home very soon. By the way, the engine really likes the idea of g3 here, but to me it's very far from being clear. After rook h3, queen d4, rook h7, admittedly black's position is ugly, but to a human eye this open h file is a little bit like, I don't know if I want this. And after queen a4, apparently, yeah, white is just completely winning because we are going to pick off the c pawn. And in case of c5, we have got this absolutely stunning book. Rook takes c5, and now black is paying the price for having to put the rook on h7 to defend the mate on g7 earlier on. Now we are coming in with a mate from e8. Now these are the depths that I would say it's extremely unlikely that any human would uncover in a 15-minute game. And king f1 was just a supremely natural move to play, because it's easy to see that once this queen comes in, the counterpunch on a6 will be way heavier. Queen a6, rook f8, rook takes c6, and Magnus' strategy is just a complete knockout success. And literally, absolutely seamlessly, from opening to middle game to winning position, he just got there by pure strategy and nothing else. And that actually resonates really well with what he was saying in his post-game interview, I think yesterday, when he said that he's not really feeling too well in the calculation department, so he plays a lot on intuition in this tournament. And this is just a textbook case of that. That this was intuition combined with common sense, combined with most basic chess principles, and the divine victory that is now concluded by queen h2, rook c8. Like I told you, the backstring dramas are real. Bishop d6 takes, and rook c8 decides the game. The f8 bishop is just not holdable due to the various tactical ideas that are incoming here. Pragg tried to play rook f5 here to at least defend the f7 pawn. I tried to make queen h1, queen king e2, queen b1 work with the idea of counter-attacking, but of course black is late to the party. And here a spectacular mate finishes the game, very much akin to the game-ending motif, by the way. Queen c8 check, king e7, bishop a3 check. That is the real dagger coming from the side. King f6, queen d8, and here I found a marvelous checkmate after king e5, queen e7 check, king f5, and pawn g4. Nothing like finishing a game with a pawn checkmate would have finished the game. Instead, however, Pragg went rook f5, after which your cruel engine is going to yell at you a mate in 13, because that's what engines do these days. And indeed, after rook takes f8, again, there is not much left in this game other than putting the pieces back in the box. Because after king takes queen c8 check, now the checkmate is even faster. In fact, the reason why the engine says that it's mate in 13 is because after king e7, bishop a3, instead of walking into a mate in 2 here, like so, black can elongate the misery with queen d6 when another 10 moves will be necessary to deliver the mate. Pragg actually allowed this, I think he did. Or maybe that was now me adding to it. But anyway, after this point, the game is over, and Carlsen came out victorious. A marvelous game of chess, which once again demonstrated strategies that we have known for at least 100 years. And up to date, they ring true and they remain relevant, and that's really awesome to watch. It's also awesome to watch how well the reigning world champion is playing. Although his victory over Pragg was very clean, it's a 3-0 victory, so they didn't even need to play the last game. Nonetheless, I'm super excited once again to follow and watch the games of the Indian youngster. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to review games by him that he won in the coming rounds. So please stay tuned. I will be back with more. Don't forget to like, to sub, to comment. And yeah, I will be back with the next video soon. Thanks for watching.